Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Bruce. In front of me is my 2023 KTM 390 Adventure motorcycle. I've had this now about a year and a half. I've put 4,200 miles on it. Been riding on the pavement, off pavement, overnighters, camping. I've towed it, trailered it. I've dropped the bike, picked it up. So I've got a pretty good idea about this bike and how it works. I wanted to give a review on it now since I've had it for a while, but I didn't want to do the traditional review where I go over every part on the bike. Instead, I'm going to tell you why you should buy this bike if you're looking for a small displacement adventure bike, and also reasons why you should not buy this bike. And at the end of the video, I will answer the question, would I buy this bike again if I had to do it all over? So stick around for this video if you want to know more about the KTM 390 Adventure, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So why should you buy this bike? One of the main reasons I bought this bike was weight. This is by far the lightest adventure motorcycle that's out there. Now, I'm not talking about the dual sports. Dual sport motorcycles are going to weigh quite a bit less than this, but for an adventure-based motorcycle at 379 pounds, this bike is way lighter than most other bikes. My previous bike was a Yamaha Tenere 700. That was about 450 pounds. The larger bikes like the BMW R1250 GS, that's 591 pounds wet. And I just can't imagine riding that off on some trail, having it fall over, and I'm riding by myself and having to pick it up. So this bike I can manhandle by myself. Dry weight's about 345 pounds. I mostly ride alone, and weight is a huge issue for me. Being able to maneuver the bike and being able to pick it up should it fall. I don't want to be stuck out in the woods somewhere with a bike that I can't lift up and no way to get out, no cell phone coverage. So weight was a huge issue for me buying this bike. Well, one reason you shouldn't buy this bike is its power. It's got 44 horsepower and about 37 Newton meters of torque. Now, most adventure motorcycles have way more power than that. Again, looking at the BMW R1250 GS, that's 136 horsepower. A lot more horsepower than this one at 44. But I found out as long as you're not going to use this bike for long distance highway travel, it works just as well as my Yamaha Tenere 700 did on back roads and twisties, gravel, dirt roads. It actually works better. Having less horsepower but sufficient torque for me makes it a lot more maneuverable back in the woods on dirt and gravel and rocky roads. So if you're looking for one to go adventure touring, don't buy this bike. And if you're looking for a real inexpensive bargain as your entry into adventure motorcycle riding, don't buy this bike. It's not expensive, but it's not cheap either. It's going to cost you around $7,600 plus all the other fees that go on it before you get it out the door. And that's quite a bit more expensive than other bikes in its category. The motorcycle, the adventure motorcycle that mostly compares to the KTM 390 is the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 that came out this past year. That bike sells for $57.99, so that's $1,000, $1,500 or so less. And some of the other bikes are also going to be in that price range too. So this is a little bit pricey for a small adventure motorcycle, but if you compare it again to the BMW R1250 GS, that's about $18,000. So you can buy two of these bikes for one of the big BMW GS bikes. So cost, is it pricey? It's kind of a personal thing. I thought this was a pretty good bargain at its price, but others might consider it to be a little bit expensive for the size and capacity of the bike. You should buy this motorcycle because of its seat height and seat comfort. The seat height on the KTM 390 Adventure, the 2023 model that I have, is about 32.6 inches, and it's got a fairly wide and comfortable seat. Now that's pretty low. There's many bikes out there that are 34, 35 inches in for the seat height. Now I have a 30 and a half inch inseam, so I can sit on this bike, and with my motorcycle boots I can flat foot, and that really adds a lot of confidence to my riding, especially when I'm off the pavement. The problem I had with the Yamaha Tenere 700 is it was about 2 inches taller in the seat height, and there was a couple times when I couldn't get my foot down in time and the bike went over. So having a low seat height for me is really a reason to buy this bike. And don't buy this bike if you like to ride standing up. If you spend a lot of time standing up on the pegs when you're riding, this is not the bike for that. And there's a number of reasons why. One is the rider triangle is fairly small, in part because the wheels are a 19-inch front wheel, 17-inch rear, so the wheelbase is a little bit short. So when you sit in the bike, it's a little cramped. The pegs are also small and they're tilted forward, so when you stand up, you're leaning over the front part of the bike. Now I added risers to this bike, which do help, but still I find that I can't ride standing up for lengthy periods of time. It's just not comfortable, and I'm a little bit cramped. So if standing up is your gig, don't buy this bike. And what about reliability? If you followed the news, you realize that KTM, the corporation, is struggling to stay afloat. Not sure what's going to happen with them. And there's been some claims of unreliability amongst some of the other models. Not so much the KTM 390 Adventure. Now I've had this bike, like I said, about a year and a half, and the issues that I had with it were ones that I caused myself. So I've not had any reliability issues based on the manufacturing. But it is a concern, I guess. I mean, if you really want a super reliable bike, I'd stick probably with the Japanese models. But would I take this bike if I was going on a around the world adventure? I'm not so sure, because it's not just the reliability issues, but where am I going to get parts? Where am I going to get expertise to work on the bike? So I would say reliability is maybe a bit neutral, maybe negative, maybe a reason not to buy this bike. I think for me, because I'm riding locally here, not long distances, and there's a KTM dealer around me, that the reliability is not too much of an issue. But if reliability is an issue for you, don't buy this bike. So if you like rider aids in your adventure motorcycle, then buy this bike, because it's a small bike, but surprisingly has a number of rider aid features that you don't see on a bike this size. It's got traction control, it's got switchable ABS, it has an off-road and an on-road mode, it's got ride-by-wire. There's, my KTM, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but you can link up through Bluetooth with your phone for some additional features that I don't really use. But it has a number of those kind of aids, electronic aids, that you really don't see on a small adventure bike. So if you're into that stuff, if you really want all those safety features, rider modes, nice clear display, very up to date, then buy this bike. And if you like good disc brakes, this has the Bi-Breed brakes, which I found to be very good, both the front and the back. I've not had any problem with it. I think they're an excellent brake for this size and weight of a bike. So if brakes, quality of your brakes is an issue, I'd say buy this bike. And what about suspension of this bike? Some small bikes have issues with cheap, non-adjustable suspension on the front and back. Well, this is really good. The suspension on this bike, front and back, in my mind is excellent. It's adjustable, both the front and the rear, which again you don't always see on smaller bikes. It's easy to adjust. I do adjust it a bit if I'm carrying some camping gear and a lot of weight on the back. But I'd say if suspensions, having a good suspension is an issue, buy this bike. And what about ground clearance? Now this bike has, as I mentioned, it has a 19-inch front wheel, 17-inch rear. So it doesn't have the 21 and 18 that you see on larger adventure motorcycles. And so the ground clearance is a little bit less than other bikes. And the bash plate that comes with this bike is pretty cheap, just made out of fiberglass. So I bashed that a few times and replaced it with an upgraded bash plate. I have a video about that if you want to see that. So if ground clearance is an issue, if you like going over boulders and rocks and you ride on kind of rough trails and areas where the bike can get hung up, and because it does have a short wheelbase also, then I would say don't buy this bike, because the clearance isn't great. Now, I don't ride those kind of roads. I ride forest roads, gravel and dirt mostly, and ground clearance isn't an issue, or it hasn't been an issue yet. I have banged it sometimes, but I think on any bike you're gonna occasionally bump into a stump or a rock. But it's if that's what you do, is ride some of those rough off-road trails and you need that ground clearance, don't buy this bike. And finally, what about rider confidence? For me, that's a big issue. If I put all this together, the seat height, the weight, the suspension, all these parts really add up to rider confidence. Now, on this bike, when I took it out for a test before I bought it, I could tell right away I was a lot more confident on this bike than I was on my Yamaha Tenere 700. I've also ridden a couple other adventure bikes, some BMW bikes, and the Royal Enfield also. And this bike just felt a lot more confident. I felt like I was in control of this bike. And because of that, I enjoyed it a lot more. I could push my limits a bit more, not being too afraid of the bike, taking over instead of me taking over the bike. So if rider confidence is an issue, if you're kind of struggling with that, or if you're aging like what I am and I've got a bad knee, issues of getting older and being able to pick up the bike and being able to handle that bike, this is definitely a confidence building bike. If you're just getting into adventure motorcycle riding, this is a good bike. If you're like me and maybe downsizing a bit but still adventure riding, this is a great bike. If you want confidence in riding an adventure motorcycle, buy this bike. Okay, so it kind of comes down to the big question: would I buy this bike again now that I've had it for a year and a half? Am I satisfied with it? Should I buy this bike? Should I sell this bike? Should I get a different bike? Would I get a different bike? And that's a little bit of a complex question, but I think I've got the answer. And the answer is yes, I would buy this bike again. I've really thoroughly enjoyed riding this bike in spite of some of the shortcomings. I don't ride on the freeway very often, and the short stints that I do, I can do 70, 75 miles an hour on this bike. I don't want to do it for more than about an hour, but it's fine because I'm not going to be riding this, on an interstate highway across the country. It's not what this bike's built, although you can do it. I'm sure there are people that do. But yeah, I would buy it again. It's the main reasons are the weight, the seat height, the suspension, and the confidence. As I mentioned, I really feel confident on this bike. Now, since I bought this bike, Royal Enfield has come out with their Himalayan 450. I've ridden the old Himalayan, the 411, through Mexico. That's kind of how I ended up damaging my knee. And the 450 is definitely an upgrade from the 411. If that bike was available the same time I bought this, which of those two bikes would I pick? The Himalayan 450 or the KTM 390? That's kind of a toss-up because I think the KTM 390 with its low weight really kind of speaks to me. I like a bike that doesn't have a lot of weight and has its weight down low, which the KTM does. The Royal Enfield 450, the Himalayan, still weighs a lot. It's about 400 and close to 40 pounds. That's 60 pounds more than this bike, and that does make a difference. And the Himalayan also has its weight a little bit higher up, and you can tell when you pick up the Royal Enfield that it feels a little bit heavy for a small bike. If they were able to knock off about 30 pounds, then I'd say maybe I would have bought that bike. But I'm happy with the KTM, with the 390. Right now, if I was to buy another bike, it would be to supplement this bike, not to replace it. But we'll wait and see. There's word out there that BMW's looking at building another small adventure motorcycle. They already have the 310, which is kind of small, let's say. But hopefully BMW comes out with a bike, and I'd be interested in seeing what they come out with if they do. In the meantime, I'm sticking with my 390 Adventure. Buy this bike. Okay, that's it for my buy this bike, don't buy this bike review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Leave any comments you have below, and I will see you next time on one of my senior moments.